Welcome to the Road to Cinema podcast from Jog Road Productions, featuring the Oscar-winning editor of Rocky, Scott Conrad. Subscribe to the Road to Cinema podcast on iTunes for the latest updates. Log on to jogroadproductions.com to read the Road to Cinema blog. You can also check out our Road to Cinema YouTube series on the Jog Road Productions YouTube channel. And don't forget, we're also on Twitter at Jog Road. Your first job in the business was at 20th Century Fox in the mailroom,
yeah,
which sort of led to the publicity department.
Mailroom, publicity, editing, yeah.
And what was your experience like those days in 20th Century Fox? That was sort of the last days of the studio system. And
yeah, I loved it. It was, last night we watched Sand Pebbles, which was done while I was there.
The Steve McQueen.
One of the films I've always loved. It's such a great character arc from McQueen. But, it was like a country club. I mean, it really was. Everybody, and there were so many excellent editors there. I don't know if have you ever been on the Fox lot and seen what used to be the editorial department?
No.
Well, it's shaped like a boat. Big thing with 3 stories high, and the film vaults are on the top. But anyway, no, it was really a fun place with a lot of excellent editors and a lot of good people to learn from.
Did you discover there that you were interested in editing just from observing other editors working?
Well, I thought I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid, and I did a couple little things. I did a lot of plays. I did plays with Mia Farrow. She was going to Mountain St. Mary's. I was going to Chaminade at the time.
Oh, Chaminade,
yeah. And they were over by Hamilton High School in those days, in Beverlywood there. But, so we did some plays back and forth with each other, and I thought I wanted to be an actor, but it was bad for my head and bad for my stomach. It was a terrible upset stomach. Matter of fact, I got an appendicitis attack before one of the plays.
Wow.
And so anyway, I gave that up. My last straw was I decided I wasn't going to be an actor, and I was working at Vaughn's Market, where the West Hills Mall, not the West Hills, but the mall is there on Pico and Westwood.
The Westfield, I think?
Yeah, whatever that is. I was working at Vaughn's Market there as a checker, and there was this lady who was a casting director at Fox, and she kept coming through, and she was like, you really should be an actor. Well, you should try it. And I said, no, I don't do that stuff anymore. So she finally talked me into coming in for a reading for a part. And I got the third call back, and it was down to 2 of us, one, myself and somebody else for the part in this thing. And the guy that got it was Ryan O'Neal.
Oh, wow.
It was for Peyton Play. And it turned out, too, which was funny, because Mia was in
on a
Peyton
TV
Play.
show, yeah.
So, anyway, I went to school. I thought I wanted to be an architect, and after 2 years of math, analytical geometry, and calculus, I said, this isn't for me. This is a lot more math than it is art. So I dropped out of college, and that's when I went to work for Fox. And as soon as I got around, the thing that was so great about the mailroom and publicity was that I got to go and meet people on all aspects of it.
Yeah.
And the editing part just fascinated me, and I wanted to direct at that point too. And everybody said, well, one of the best ways to get to be a director, and Robert Weiss, that did Sand Pebbles, is to be an editor.
Oh, yeah. You edited Citizen Kane and so many great movies. So
I said, well, okay, I'll try this, and I loved it. Then I got bored, because in those days you had to be you had an apprenticeship of 8 years before you could cut. Mm-hmm. And so after a year and a half, 2 years of that, I went, oh, this is boring. I've Peter Principled out with everything that I can learn with this, so I went back to school for cinema. That's when I went to SC. And I was there for 2 years, but Barbara McLean, who was head of post-production and head of editorial for Fox, was a really, really wonderful lady, and she'd done a lot of excellent films for Zanuck. And she liked me, and so she said, if you're going to go to school, that's great. And I put myself through school. So she said, we'll give you a job here as an apprentice. We'll move you around on whatever film needs you, and yet you can call your hours pretty much the way you need to for classes. So that was great, and that worked for 2 years. And I had less than a year to finish. And I was working as an apprentice on Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. And they fired the editor, who, by the way, cut one of my wife's father's films, and Fulmer Blankstead. They fired him, and they moved the assistant editor up to editor and asked me if I wanted to be the assistant.
Wow.
So it was like one of those, in those days, that was one of those opportunities. And of course, we pretty much had an idea that Butch Cassidy could be something, even in the very early stages.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I had to drop out of school. That was the end of that.
And I believe on that film there was an opportunity to edit the making of documentary.
I was, being the assistant, they went on location to Colorado and then to Mexico. And one of my really good friends that I made before, he was in the sort of one of the apprentice programs at Fox. His father was a very influential person, so they would move him around to different departments to get experience to be a producer. And Ron Priceman, he went on location with them, and George Roy Hill gave Ronnie a 16 millimeter Bolex with a 12 to 120 Angenieux zoom lens to just use and fool around with. Ronnie never shot a camera before, but he also had a great teacher in Conrad Hall. Yeah. And Connie would sort of show him, and he started shooting just little stuff and everything. I was, why don't you get this? Why don't you interview Redford and Captain Ross? I see on the call sheet they're going to blow up the train. You got to shoot that, right? And so I would cut, or I'd do all the assistant work during the daytime, and then he would send back the 16 millimeter footage with the 35, with the big stuff. And at night, on a movie I'd try to put together something for the documentary. So when they came back, they did things like Bill Abbott, who was an Academy Award-winning visual effects guy. That's where they put Redford and Newman on a big crane out here at the Fox Ranch. Yeah. And with a big blue screen instead of green screen. And they jumped off the crane and they married it together with the shots.
Oh, the famous scene where they're jumping
off
the cliff.
Shit, that one. Yeah. And that's how that was done. And so we shot that and put it all together. They won an Emmy for Best Documentary. So that I got called up. I got called on it on the carpet, so to speak, by the Editors Guild, because it was way before my 8 years were up. And I didn't really know. It was just going to be this educational thing. And George Roy Hill sold it to CBS, and it aired twice. Wow. And so they said, we're going to kick you out of the Editors Guild and all this stuff. And I had to go and plead my case. And, I didn't know. And I worked. And I said, but don't do it again. Yeah. Which, of course, I did. But I had to really do it.
So it's a great documentary. I saw it on the DVD of Butch Cassidy. It's very candid. You sort of see all the moments and Paul Newman talking to George Roy Hill and they're communicating about the scene.
It was fun.
So after that, you had worked with both Lou Lombardo and Danford Green.
Right.
So you were their apprentices, their assistants?
Assistants, yeah. And I got to cut on films that they would... In those days, it was... I always encourage my assistants today, but I don't know, with schedules and it's just a different world. They don't seem to do it that much, want to do it that much. Yeah. But they really, good editors would encourage you to cut a scene or cut some scenes. So I did that a lot with Danny and with Louie.
So I believe one of the films was Long Goodbye. Robert Altman.
Yeah.
What did you observe working on that film? And
just about everything. It was like it was a movable feast with stars and personalities coming in every night. It was really pretty amazing because Altman was an actor's director, and they all loved him, and he had that cachet. And you'd have anybody from Barbara Parkins, Ryan, and you'd have Peter Bart, Peter Goober, you'd have Warren Beatty, Julie Christie. On any given night, and Louie and I, of course, we would cut during the daytime, and so that I could cut more, I got Louie together with his son. They were sort of estranged with Tony Lombardo. We ended up cutting my cousin Vinny and a couple other things. And I said, Louie, bring him on over. So I went, because I wanted him to do more of the assistant work so I could cut more. And of course, that sort of smoothed me out with Louie, because of course blood's thicker than friendship and stuff like that. And Tony went on to become his assistant.
Were there any scenes you remember cutting in Long Goodbye that
so
came into the film?
So long ago, I really don't. But we would, we'd cut during the day, and then they'd come back for dailies, run dailies 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and they'd be lots of food and lots of everything. And they'd run the dailies. Everybody looking at it and smoking dope and everything else. And then when we finished the dailies, Bob would say, Louis, why don't you show them this scene? So we always had to have scenes prepared that were cut to bring them down. And it was going sometimes at midnight, or after. And but it was fun.
So a lot of Rob Rollman's style was to say to the editor, put together the scenes first, I'll observe them, I'll give you notes, then you can go back and tweak them later on.
Right, yeah. There weren't, it's really interesting. In those days, it was pretty rare, at least at Fox, it was pretty rare for a director to sit in constantly with an editor. The only case of it, and all the time from 64 through, I think I left Fox to go out on my own, actually with Danny, like 69 or 70. The only case I ever saw that was Frank Schaffner and with Hugh Fowler cutting Patton, and he was there with him every single day. And it was one of those things that was talked about because all the other editors and the people were, what's this? Oh, I see him there every day,
Yeah.
And
in the days of the studio system, it was really departmental. Like the writers wrote the script, and then the director would get it, and then when the director was finished shooting the film, it was just going to the editing department.
Right. Especially with a
and then
studio.
The director would go on to their next film to go into production. Almost.
Right. And you did a lot of them that way. And everybody kept busy.
And what do you think you learned from being an assistant that carried over when you were finally at the helm in charge of an editing department?
Just how it all worked. I mean, I don't know any specifics besides, you're observing what the editor's doing in different style. I mean, one of the best editors at Fox is somebody you heard people don't even really know about. His name is Bob Simpson. And he cut things like South Pacific, and I mean, the list of films is that long for Fox. A really excellent film. And the guy unfortunately, he was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And his assistant, Pembroke, who actually, when we won the award, we were up against Pembroke Herring and Bobby Jones for Bound for Glory, and a lot of my friends were against that night. Mm-hmm. But Pem would have to, Bob wouldn't show up. It would be noon when he wouldn't be there. And he'd call home and say, oh yeah, he left at 8 o'clock this morning. Mm-hmm. So he'd start, Fox, and just go down Pico, hitting all the bars and restaurants so they could find him. And he'd bring him back, give him food, get him set up on the thing, and he could cut more film better by the end of the day than any other editor did. Mm-hmm. It's just that he never moved on to the next step of directing, and it just sort of ate away at the guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But all of these, Bill Reynolds, I mean, so many good editors there. The guy that cut Bullock, whose name I can't remember, Frank something. And that's what you observe styles of editors, what they did. Yeah. What made it work.
Yeah.
What was your opinion, sort of putting together an assembly cut versus putting together like a first cut that you feel is sort of the best of what the movie could be?
I hate the word assembly.
Really?
I always tell directors, producers, I say, I don't do assemblies. If you want an assembly, you would have an assistant do that. Yeah. I do a cut. I do the editor's cut. And then it'll be a good cut. And from there, we'll sit down with the director and then you guys and make it perfect. But it's my first shot at it, and I can bring my own creativity to it and try things that you may not have thought about. So that it's only in your benefit to do that. I'm trying to think of the name. John Badham and I were at a film seminar years ago, and he had an editor he worked with all the time, Frank Morris. And he said, because we were talking about going on location and how it wasn't as much, he said, I never wanted Frank to come on location with me. Yeah. I said, really, why? He said, because I didn't want him to know that it took me 2 hours to set up the crane shot. Mm. Because if he had a better way of opening the scene or doing the scene, then I wanted to see what his thought was.
Yeah. So you don't get too precious with the material and you just...
Objectivity.
Yeah.
Objectivity.
In that situation as well, when you're creating a first cut, do you sometimes veer away from the screenplay? Or is that ever used as...
You're talking about me now or editors then?
Oh, well, just in general, your opinion. Do you ever believe in veering away?
I read the script. I read it thoroughly. Sometimes if they want, then I will give them notes, and give them ideas of things that might not work, or they want to move around or something like that. And I'll analyze it and I put it away. And I don't go back to the script unless I have a problem looking for the line script that the script supervisor will do to see if I'm missing something. Or to see if it's something really complicated that okay, what do they mean here? Or where is this shot supposed to go? That's about it. Because it's a new editing. You've heard it before. Editing is the final rewrite.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different than what the script was. And I don't want to be locked in by what the script was, because it's already been transformed. They've changed dialogue, they've changed transitions, they've changed, a lot of stuff. Had to shoot in a different place. Yeah. So I don't want to have that in my brain.
When you're either cutting or when you're first reading the script, do you ever have any ideas for music cues at all, or even ways sound can fit in to emphasize a scene?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, you see it, and first of all, you cut it just for its own sake. Yeah. But let's say you finish the scene, and it's like a thriller in particular. They bring to your mind what the cue should be, I will put in music sometimes pretty early, but not for the whole movie. Just like a particular scene. And like a thriller is one of the most, I find it one of the most challenging to cut. I mean, I love doing it, and I've done pretty well at it, but it's because in thrillers, there's great leeway as to how long you can hold a moment.
Yeah.
If you hold it too long, it's boring.
Yeah.
If you shorten it, you're not getting everything out of it before the scare.
And building that tension
to
keep the audience on the edge of their seats.
And so when you do a cut, when I do a first cut, you know that if it's sitting there silent, people are going to go, oh, that's too long. You put music to it, and it's like, maybe we should play that out a little bit more. Yeah. It's a whole different deal. Music changes everything.
Yeah, can definitely push the pace along as well.
Well, music just changes it. It lifts it. It's the third voice of film,
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'll do that with that. With comedies are really difficult to do temp scores with, because every comedy sort of has its own kind of quirkiness or flavor,
like on the
tone.
Cheech and Chong films that you worked on.
Well, that was pretty easy, because those guys were. My Sharona was like, that was obvious,
Yeah.
And they told me Cheech always had ideas about music. Well, the first one, Up in Smoke, that was Lou Adler. I mean, of course, he was king as far as, I don't know if you know who Lou Adler is.
Oh, he's a big
he was one of the biggest record producers of the 60s and 70s. I mean, he had, from Monterey, he started with the Monterey Pop Festival back in the 60s, and he had groups. When we were cutting that, everybody from the Eagles or Carole King or everybody would come through that house and pay homage to Lou and ask him for advice, and he was amazing.
In terms of comedies, some people say a lot of great comedy scenes play out better in a master than with a lot of cut-ins, close-ups.
2 shots and falls rather than close-ups. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? That comedy works better?
Well, because reactions and people playing off of each other, and there's a certain reality. I mean, if you can, my theory about close-ups is that you save them, because it's a period, or it's if you overuse a close-up, you vitiate its importance. By the time you get to use it, you've used it. You've drained that's your real punch when you want it. Oh, wow, this is important. We watched a film the other night that I hadn't seen in years, and it's one of the films that I always have had in my mind as an example of way overusing close-ups. And one particular director that always does it. And the 2 brothers. One does and one doesn't. One makes brilliant films, and that's we're talking about Tony Scott and Ridley Scott. And I had always remembered Revenge as being just a terrible example of overusing the close-ups. You like those long lens stack close-ups. Yeah. And it's just, you're in these locations in Mexico, you don't even see what's around you. You don't get to feel it.
You don't really have a sense of the geography of the place.
Geography and reality. I mean, you're always in like this, It's like, come on, it's claustrophobic. But anyway, my theory of close-ups is save them.
Yeah.
Use them, make it really important.
Yeah.
And comedy is like especially if you got, two characters, take all of them, it's Gene Wilder or whoever. Seeing the two of them work together in the scene is just, it's much better.
Yeah.
Always two shots if you can, twos and fulls.
And on Rocky, which is a sports film, and you're dealing with a lot of boxing sequences.
I wouldn't call it
as well as
film.
intimate scenes as well.
Yeah.
But what were the and even montages too? What did you sort of see going into that, as far as the music that eventually went in and everything else in terms of putting it
Bill
together?
Conti was on it from very early on, and he Avildsen had not done a lot of films, but he was very good, very talented. And the producers, Charles Winkler, wanted a contemporary. They wanted more of a rock or contemporary music score. And Avildsen wanted classical music, particularly for the fight and the montage. And so Conti, what he did was he sort of married those two together. And he gave it that kind of a little bit of a classical feel, but with the contemporary notes. And he would give us piano tracks, all pretty much through the process, so we could lay it against the cut and see how it would work and adjust things. And it was a great way to work. You don't get that much anymore. Time constraints and money the composers want if they're good, and nobody wants to do it until it's completely locked and they don't want to do it. Which is really too bad, because you can do it with temp scores so that you can play out moments and see how things are going to work, but it's always going to change, because what a composer's going to do is going to be different than your temp. So, they sort of capture that feeling, but, especially with sports things or action or montages, so you can really make them, tune them perfectly to the
timing
music.
Is so important, so you hit the right note on the right...
If you walk the film and everything's, it's not, I'm not cutting egg anymore, but everything's, you're on the online, the things you've done, it's expensive, and you can't go back and change much for it. So it's unfortunate.
What do you think the challenges were of editing Rocky, in terms of even like the boxing matches and having all of that boxing footage and trying to marry it together? So, one hit comes in and then you want to obviously cut to the other.
It was 84,000 feet of film and 6 cameras.
Wow.
Shot in 3 days. And in those days, that was a lot. And because Richard Halsey that I did it with, Richard and I had worked together before, and he was on location with them in Philadelphia. I wasn't on the film. So he didn't get much cut at all. He was back there, and he stayed the whole time and had a good time. And he came back, and he just got started cutting. And Charles Winkler thought they wanted to put it in Cannes. This is like January. And so it was a rush to get it together. And he called me up to come in and do it. And so I started with the fight. And actually, that's a tough place to start. Because you just, there's all this. Have you ever started something and thinking, oh my God,
it's just overwhelmed.
What did I get myself into? Can I do this? And you just, it's like everything, whenever you have that thought about anything, like it's just, you just start.
Yeah.
You just start. You start running it and looking at it and getting in here. Some of the really good editors at Fox, sort of a common theme was run the film in a scene, run it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Don't just start. It's like today, a lot of kids that come out of film schools, because of computers, there's this tendency just to get in and start cutting.
Before looking at all the raw footage.
Before really looking at it all and getting it all in here and figuring out what you really want to do.
Yeah.
And those, depending on how far back you want to go with film, at least when I was there, they had butt splices, they had tape slices, right?
Yeah.
But get like that, you had to change too many times. And before I was doing it, they had to put in black frames. Like if they made a cut, because everything was hot spliced, so you're cutting it off. And so one of the examples of a good editor was how many black spots it didn't have. Right. So you really had to think about it all first. And so all those guys were trained like that, and I learned like that.
Yeah.
And I've had assistants say to me, how'd you how'd you know? You just went in, you knew exactly what you wanted to do. And I said, yeah, because I ran it all 3 times. I had it up here, and I knew what I wanted to put it.
See, if you just jump in without looking at everything a few times and you could miss something, that would be great, and it could really, make the scene better. In terms of putting together a boxing scene, how important is sound? The actual on-set sound, and then creating Foley sound that can make the scene pop a little more.
Yeah, well, see, in those days, both with a moviola and on a chem. You know what a chem is? A flatbed editing table?
Yeah.
Okay. I transitioned to a chem on the Robert Altman film, on Long Goodbye. I fell in love with him. But I still use the moviola, too, in connection with chem. But you really only had one track. I mean, it wasn't like today that, you got 16 tracks of sound and you can put in sound effects and boxing hits and everything else. So, yeah, the production sound was very important. And at least for the exertions and to have life in it. We actually, one of the beauties of the studio system was that you could, when you finish a good cut and you felt pretty good about you could give it to the sound effects guys to do a temp, put it together temp and go in the mixing room and mix it. You couldn't spend a lot of time and money because it's on the production, but still, that's what we did, and it worked. I didn't show it to Chartoff and Winkler until I had hits and stuff in it with those guys. I learned that pretty early. Is that first impression is the most important impression, and you can tell, like when you just do disclaimers before you show a film, and people get up on and they talk and they say, "Well, now, don't pay attention to this, don't pay attention to this." And you sort of have to say, it's got temp sound. It doesn't matter. No matter what you said, people are still they only know what they see and what they hear. That's it. So whatever you're going to show, you better be pretty confident that it's going to play.
Cutting a lot of the intimate scenes in the film, Rocky and Adrian, and also Adrian's brother Burt Young. What was your take on some of that material? I think those scenes are beautifully acted.
My favorite scene, the dramatic one. Basically, what happens, I think I mentioned, I started with a fight. Yeah. Richard started at the beginning, and we sort of met in the middle. Because I worked my way backwards almost.
From the end to the point.
Yeah. My favorite, so the back half of the movie is much more mine, and the front half is more Richard's. There's some mix and match there. But my favorite scene was the one where Richard Meredith had to come to Rocky to try to talk him into letting him manage him again. Because it was just such a poignant scene.
Yeah.
And all of the emotions, and I think it's Sylvester's best scene in the movie. Maybe the best scene he's ever done.
Yeah.
And
it's really a turning point in the film. It really wakes Rocky up and gets him motivated.
Yeah. And then the scene, the way John shot it, down that long hallway, the stairway, looking at him going down, and that he's like, and he goes outside, and Rocky comes out and gets up. It's just a great scene.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful set, too, that really emphasized Rocky's life and put him in that
and give
world.
John Avildsen all the credit for really putting together, shooting, and directing a great scene.
The filmmaking process, everybody, the actors, the production designer, the cinematographer, it should all be sort of an amalgam of everybody's ideas and,
Yeah, we were... do you know who Lloyd Ahern is?
No.
Cinematographer.
Okay.
Very good one. He worked a lot with Hill.
George Ray Hill?
Not George Ray Hill, no. Walter Hill.
Walter Hill, okay.
Did a lot of films with Walter Hill. He's still working. Actually, Lloyd and I grew up together in Chevy Hills. We went on a fishing trip last week, and we were both talking about how we so miss the dailies routine in the theater and film. Because you always, you're in a projection room, you're looking at everything with everybody.
Yeah.
Script is there, camera's there, editor's there, director, producer. You got a problem, you see it, you decide what you're going to do about it right then and there. And everybody's, you're working together. It was so much better.
Today, the producers get a DVD, everybody gets
watch it on their iPad.
Yeah.
Which I hate. I hate. DPs hate it worse than I do. It's terrible because, you start thinking close-ups.
Yeah.
You know, that was sort of what happened in the beginning. With, if you look at a lot of films that start in the beginning of the digital process. I converted to Avid in '93. And in the beginning, because everybody was cutting on smaller monitors, and you're looking at it like this, and there was this tendency to, think like a TV screen. You're looking at it that way. But fortunately, when you had been trained in film and going in, I'd cut a reel, and we'd go put her up on the screen and look at it on a 60 by 40 screen. Oh, hey. Wow, the wide shot really plays well. I want to stick with that longer.
Yeah. Later on, there's another movie that I like quite a bit, Lucas, which is a sort of a coming-of-age film.
Yeah, I did more. I came in to sort of be a, what can I say, a ghost editor almost in a way on that one. Because some of the bigger scenes, like the football games in the beginning, some of the crowd stuff, they needed help. And so I went in to do that. A lot of films in my career, I sort of got into that niche. I got in the niche of like being a recut guy.
Yeah. That's not really known too much. That sort of even like ghost writers are common in movies. Rewrites. So there are sort of ghost editing where you go in and you recut a film after the first editor has cut.
Well, Star is Born. I redid most
Barbra Streisand.
Right.
Okay.
I did most all the musical sequence. I just got credit down at the end. I think it's like additional sequences by or something. Because Peter Zenner was the lead editor on it, had been on it from the beginning, had a great contract. He and Barbara didn't get along at all. And they brought me in to redo the first. I started with the first thing with Christopherson, and then John Peters, and Barbara liked it, and so I ended up recutting most of the musical sequences. So it's like sort of ghost editor time, but it paid very well.
Is there any like with the Writers Guild? There's arbitration for writing credit. Is there any arbitration in the Editors Guild for editing credit?
Yeah, I only got involved in that one time. It was a TV movie called Mad Bull with Alex Karras. And the other editor they had an editor on it, and they brought me in to help. And then he was at such odds with the director that they fired him.
Yeah.
And I recut the whole movie. And then he wanted credit for it. And the director, I didn't fight so much as the director and producer fought it. So it was an arbitration with the guild, and I won.
Wow.
But basically, you got to show them cuts and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But take Mortal Kombat. Larry Kazanoff is the producer on that, and we'd worked together on a couple films. And again, doing fix-ups. So with Catherine Bigelow, I did a thing called, where I went in and recut, not an awful lot, but I recut a thing, I'm trying to remember the name of it right now.
Was it Point Break? Or
what?
Was it Point Break?
No. Well, I helped on Point Break. I did some action sequences, the skydiving and some of that kind of stuff. She did me on that. I'll tell you a funny comment. That was the second thing we did. The first one was, what was the name of it? Blue Steel.
Okay.
And it was pretty well cut. The editor was a good editor, but MGM wanted changes, she wanted changes, so we had 3 weeks at Christmas time to do some recuts, so I did that. Catherine, it's funny, I like Catherine a lot, but she brought me in to help do action sequences on, what were we just talking about?
Point Break. Yeah.
And she said, well, just sort of get it ready for us, rough it out and everything. I don't know, rough it out. My sister, rough out thing. So anyway, I cut 2 or 3 of these things, and she's, well, I don't know what to say. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, it's too good. It's ready. There's nothing for us to do. She likes to sit in there all day, every day with the editor and do it. And I don't like to work like that. So, she said, well, there's nothing left for us to do, very little. And I go, well, Catherine, I just want to give you something good. So anyway, I just worked for about 3 weeks on that one, 4 weeks, and did a bunch of action stuff and moved on. Yeah. I didn't want to be in the room all day, every day, even though I like her a lot.
Interesting film you worked on was Wagons East, and what's fascinating about that is John Candy died in the middle of filming, or I think a little bit toward the end. Is that right?
We had less. We'd done a little more than half, but it wasn't even 3/4 finished. It was
Really?
They were still maybe a third plus to go.
So that's a very unique situation where your lead actor
Only one I
passes
ever
away.
had. Yeah.
How do you handle that with the director and putting together what material you have left? Is it a lot of reconstructing the narrative?
Yeah, I remember. I'll never forget it. Came in, I think it was a Thursday morning, and the producers called in and said, he died the middle of the night. And he said, told me what happened. And I said, what do we do? What do we do? And I said, well, basically, you got three choices. I think we're just about half, maybe just a little over half. So you got three choices. You can either scrap it, forget the whole thing. You can recast, his part and reshoot, or we can try to make up with what we got and fill in with, other characters.
Yeah.
And so they basically decided to go that route, and that was probably one of the most painful experiences in my life. That and a movie called The Temp were the two most difficult experiences editing. Because here you're working on something and you know it's not going to be good. Because everything is a compromise. It's not a good compromise. I was doing things like putting him on horseback, going across the river, with that's sort of in the beginning of digital then, of the kind of things that they could do. And put him with an extra at the bar sitting there and his voiceover. It was painful. I got to tell you, that was probably one of the funniest scripts I ever read. It was a great script. It was really hysterical. And if they'd pulled it out properly, it could have been really something. And that's doubly, it's just gut grinding.
Yeah. Do you think that's common, sort of, because movies are a lot about execution, so reading a script and seeing it on the page, but really if it's not shot properly or put together the right way or performed with the right tone, it doesn't...
Right actors, right tone, right direction, all those things that have to go together. The miracle that makes a movie, it just... It is. It's a miracle making it come to life.
Yeah.
As good or better than the script.
I was wondering what you think about the page-a-minute theory, that, one screenplay page always equals a minute.
It's close.
Is it pretty much...
It's close.
Yeah.
You can't really go by that. There's some pages that it describes an action sequence that's going to go on a long time, so some pages are not reflective at all. But overall, over the whole thing, and then you have others that are going to play out a lot longer, and others are going to play a lot shorter. Yeah, I never. It's a rule of thumb that's close. That's about all.
Yeah. Do you ever have first cuts that go sort of beyond, in terms of time length, that go beyond what you think the film length should be?
Yeah.
Like 3 hours, 4 hours, and
not that long, but. I think the longest one I ever had was, again, with a TV movie. Donald Wright did it with something with Heart of Steel. And actually, I got one of the other awards for that, the ACE Awards for that. And, it was a movie for TV. And Donald really got some good foot. And he discovered actors. John Goodman was like the first thing he did. Anyway, he did a really good job, but man, he shot the heck out of the film. My first cut, and this, you gotta have, I think, the TV keeps going down for the 2-hour format. I think in those days it was like 95. Yeah, 95 for a 2-hour
so like about an hour and a half.
Commercials.
Roughly, yeah.
Well, it went from like 98 to 96 to 95. We did more and more commercials,
Yeah.
But, so you got to get it down to 95 minutes. I think the first cut was like 2.5 hours long. And the producers were nuts. And they saw all the stuff. And they actually, because we had to show it at the studio, I think it was CBS. And anyway, it was difficult cutting that down. It really was. There were a couple scenes that I really hated to see go. Scenes had to go. You couldn't just trim everything.
Yeah.
It's difficult. When you go... I like to have 10 to 15 minutes over what your projected time is. I like to have 10 or 15 minutes to play with.
Yeah.
Because there's always things that either don't work or you need to, make them really go quickly.
When you're in that situation of having a cut that's too long, do you try to go into each scene and say, okay, let's shave off seconds here, shave off seconds there, make the pace, compress it? Or
I hate that. You get things, you always get things as tight as they play.
Yeah.
But, I had one silly director on a thing that he shall remain nameless. He never did much else. There was a picture that Andy, Vanya, and Mario Cassar, when they started Carol Good, they got all these films from Canada that had good actors in them, but, they needed to be recut. They needed to be fixed up. And there was one that was really a pretty good little film. But it was too long. And the director, everything was so precious to him. And there were scenes that needed to go. And, I kept pushing for that. And he went in one day when I wasn't, he snuck into the editing room. He was like taking one frame off of every cut. And I'm like, I said, what the fuck are you doing? And it was just, it's insane. I mean, they call it, pardon my language, they call it frame fucking. And it just, when a scene plays the way a scene plays, and start really taking all like 2 frames out and 2 frames, it's really not the best way to do it.
What do you tend to do in a situation where a director really hasn't covered the scene enough, and you're really trying to make it move faster, and you sort of can't, in a sense?
That's right. Yeah, coverage. Yeah. Coverage. You got to have the coverage. And if you don't, then, sometimes you do jump cuts and make it play with music if it's a comedy, There are certain things that you can try and you can do, or you do push-ins and that kind of stuff, but it's not the most pleasant way to work. You need coverage.
Do you ever suggest coverage to a director at all?
Oh, yeah.
Before shooting?
The one I'm actually on hold for one right now because they got me started on it, and then anyway, there's a whole thing going on. They ran out of money. It's shot, but they ran out of money. So I'm on hold. But the director and I have worked together. We've done 6 films, and Don and I try to see everything as it's done. So you need this, you need that, you need this. You miss that point. And I always try, because it's so difficult today. The schedules are so compressed. It's gone like the films, they want to shoot them in 15 days, and it should be like 6 weeks. And so I always say, try and leave a contingency in the budget to go back for some pickups and reshoot. You're gonna need them, and save the walls, or save the set, save the wardrobe. Don't let the actors shave their hair off. And let us get a good cut and then see what we need. Because it didn't used to really. Well, you did, but not much. It's just time schedules today are crazy.
Especially independent films, they try to shoot as many pages a day as possible.
Yeah,
just kind of.
And editors back then, we're our own, all film people. We're our own enemies because it'll be a 24-day shoot, and then okay, well, let's do it in 21 next time. You did it.
Exactly.
Oh, great. Yeah, right. And we just worked ourselves out of 3 days.
What was the experience like winning the Academy Award? Was that sort of unexpected in a sense? Did you ever feel like Rocky that was going to go all the way in that direction?
We started to feel good about it. I'm a little superstitious, but we started to feel good about it when we showed the Academy because it got a standing ovation. Maybe it is as good as we think. And then I was not a member of ACE, and Richard wasn't yet either. And he came to me, and we were really close friends, we still are. And he said, "Do you think I ought to join?" And I said, "You're crazy if you don't," because he had been invited. And it was an invitational kind of thing in those days. I said, "You got to do it, you got to do it." Because in those days, and unfortunately it's not quite the same anymore, the Editors Guild, the Cinematographers Guild, would have their awards like a month ahead of when the Academy Awards would happen. So if you're voting in the Academy, and you're like, oh God, editing, that was good, that was good. What really? That people would look and see what the editors voted for.
Yeah.
So whoever won the AC award had a good shot. And I think like 4 out of 6 times of winning the big one. And so when we did win the AC award, thought we had a good shot. And then actually, I sent away. I got the video, the DVD of our winning recently. I got my wife's father when he accepted his award. So I thought she never had, him getting an award. I said, I know the Academy has it, and we'll give it to
They
them.
have an archive. And,
Yeah, I wrote to them, and they had to sign a disclaimer and everything. They did. They sent the DVD, and I said, well, I might as well get one of myself. And the thing was that there was 2 of us. We were up against All the President's Men, Bound for Glory, Network, 2 Minute Warning, and 2 Minute Warning and Bound for Glory had 2 editors on it. The others were singles. And so when William Holden first opened up, he said, the winner is. And we thought, oh shit, we didn't do that. And he says, oh, excuse me, the winners are. And anyway, it was fun.
I was wondering what you think has been the proudest moment of your career, whether it be working or sort of an achievement that you feel.
Well, I mean, you got to say winning a Academy Award is the proudest moment of your career.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It doesn't get much better than that. No, it's. I mean, I love what I do, and the proudest moments of my career are when you show a first cut to people and you've got it dressed up with music and effects. Everybody goes, "Wow!" That's it. And the other proudest moments are when you preview a film. And if the audience really likes it, you get good marks on a preview. Those are the proudest moments of my career.